Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze. Welcome to the Cool Explorations podcast. I am your host, Tony Peters. Today we'll be talking to Zack Alexander, who has gone through the Camp Hope program at the PTSD Foundation of America. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his story as a war vet and the process of healing that he has gone through in his PTSD journey. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cool Explorations podcast. I am your host, Tony Peters. Today we have on Zack Alexander, and he is a Camp Hope graduate for PTSD Foundation of America, which we were just talking to David earlier. So going to be very interesting to hear the other side of this part of the program. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself right now and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Zack Alexander. I am the general manager of our Houston chapter for the PTSD Foundation of America. So basically, it's my job to anything that's closer to Houston than San Antonio or Dallas, I'm in charge of. I do everything from, me and my team do everything from get the guys who need Camp Hope, which is our residential program, which we're going to talk about. I get the guys who need that there. I also we connect veterans to different resources. If it's a veteran who doesn't meet our qualifications, we have partnerships around the state that will help them and get them into what they do as well. So we do a lot as far as outreach goes. We're the team who, when there's a veteran in crisis, and we have our crisis line, and we're partnered with a lot of the crisis intervention teams for the local police department. So if they ever have a crisis call with a combat veteran, they call us, we show up, and we help de-escalate the situation before it gets hectic. We're the guys who go into the bars and the crack houses and dope houses and snatch dudes up and get them out the darkness and just put them on a path of recovery and dealing with the unseen wounds of war.
Yeah, which is often something that they are trying to hide or just not acknowledge. So I know.
Yeah.
I know that can be tough to kind of break through with that. Is that something you've experienced a lot?
Oh, absolutely. I know when I got out of the military, I didn't even want to believe that I had PTSD, because when I got out in 2010, that term it was a new term that was utilized. I remember the first time I ever heard it, we got back from Iraq, and one of my junior Marines came up to me for help because he had been struggling. I didn't really know what to do to help him, so I just directed him towards our platoon sergeant, Sergeant Patine. And all Sergeant Patine looked at him and said, "You know who has PTSD? Expletive, women, bitches who were raped." That's what he said. And so, me being that's my first interaction with PTSD. Of course, I didn't have it. So when I got out of the military, I was struggling pretty hard, and I didn't want to acknowledge that I had it. So I ended up doing what a lot of combat vets do, and that's self-medicate. So yeah, I have a lot of experience of not wanting to deal with PTSD.
Yeah, and it's a weakness thing, and that people view it as a weakness, and there's nothing to be ashamed of with having it. You need to face it head on in order to deal with it.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little about your testimony and what your faith looks like right now?
So I am a believer in Christ. That's probably the one thing that Camp Hope did for me, was reaffirm my relationship with God. I grew up in a Christian household. I was raised, we were at church anytime the doors were open. I had a good relationship with Jesus when I was a kid, but of course, when I got to war, that changed things. I turned my back on God. My thought process was, this isn't the things that I was seeing and having to be exposed to and do. I was like, this is not the all graceful, all loving God that I grew up loving and knowing and learning about. Now, if this is the kind of God who allows stuff like this to happen, I don't want any part of it. So I really turned my back on God. But at Camp Hope, I was able to deal with my issues, learn a different perspective on, free will and stuff like that. So it helped me reaffirm my relationship with Christ. And so, I'm actually in school right now. I just graduated a few months ago from Asbury with my Bachelor's of Science in Christian Leadership Ministry. And I'm finishing up my first semester of seminary school. So I've been able to reestablish my relationship with Christ. Absolutely.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's hard to maintain your faith when you see all the work that the devil is doing
Oh,
and how hard
absolutely.
he's working to destroy what God has created.
Yeah.
What was it like for you dealing with PTSD before Camp Hope?
Before camp, it was a nightmare. Of course, I had all the symptoms, hypervigilant, nightmares. I didn't really deal with a lot of flashbacks, nightmares more than anything. The hypervigilance, the flight or freeze. I was stuck in survival mode, and so every little stressor that I came across, my brain perceived it as a threat. And so I've been trained that that's how combat PTSD works. Our brains are stuck in flight or freeze, and for combat vets, we fight, and so every little stressor our brain perceives as a threat, and then our training kicks in, and we're trained to kill the threat. So I was constantly going through life that way, and unfortunately for me, even when I got out of the military, I jumped right into another stressful job. I was enrolled into the fire academy and EMT school before I even EAS out of the Marine Corps. So I EAS in July, and then within 3 weeks in August, I was starting EMT school, and then straight from EMT school to the fire academy. And then, my fire chief and some of the instructors really liked me. So I didn't struggle finding a job. I just went straight into one of their departments. And so I never left the stressful environment. I just stayed. And unfortunately, the things that I experienced as an EMT and a firefighter it just made my PTSD worse. And like you were talking about earlier, childhood trauma, I was sexually abused as a child. So I had PTSD before I even entered the military, much less once I got to war. And then the things that I experienced as an EMT and a firefighter. And that's what really broke me. What broke me was a call involving a child as an EMT. And that's really when I broke. And that's when I started to I dove headfirst into substance abuse to help me deal with the issues that I was having, because I didn't know what else to do, and I wasn't going to ask for help. I was a United States Marine, and the Marine Corps, we're taught that we're the baddest things walk on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
So you don't need no help. Helps for the weak, like we were talking about earlier. And there's a negative stigma for a guy like me, a alpha male combat veteran, asking for help. Like, nah, I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
And so I dove headfirst into substance abuse, and it tore apart my life. I lost everything.
Yeah, I know for myself, I had tried getting into youth care work to help kids who've gone through a lot of the same things I had been through, being molested myself as a child and being abused and abandonment issues.
Yeah,
And it was too difficult. Like you say, with your fire experience there, and it was way too difficult for me to deal with a lot
yeah.
of that stuff. I just wasn't ready mentally to face it. So I'm glad that you were able to get into Camp Hope program. Can you explain kind of what convinced you to get into the Camp Hope program and that whole process?
So what happened to me is, once I dove headfirst into substance abuse, it got bad. It got to the point where I tried to kill myself. What I would do is I'd go on these 3 week bingers, and I just come back home and tell my wife, and say, I was married with a child at the time. My daughter was 3 months. She wasn't that old. And so I'd go on these 3 week benders and come back and just give her a kiss, give her a hug, and tell her I was sorry. And then the next fight we'd have, I was back at it. And she did what she could, but she made the decision that most spouses and parents have to make, and that's do what's best for them and the family. So I came home from one of my benders one day, and my apartment was completely empty. All that was left was a TV and an Xbox. And the thought of never seeing my daughter again was, man, that was the darkest, most painful place I've ever been.
I
And that's
bet.
why I decided I was going to kill myself. Now, my dad spent, he just retired from the police department. He was on the SWAT team for years. He's a very intelligent, tough guy. He had the wherewithal to realize something was going on with me. So unbeknownst to me, he tricked my ex-wife into giving him all my weapons. So I didn't have any firearms. So what I did is I put myself in this situation hoping the universe would just take me out. And it almost did. And I came out of a blackout one day. I was at a dope house. A really good friend of mine was overdosing in front of me. I was trying to do the exact same. And that was the day that God, it was as if somebody was standing right next to me. And this voice went into my ear. And what the voice said was, if you were to accomplish your mission right now, if you were to do what you're trying to do, the pain, the negativity, the shame, the guilt, everything that you're trying to escape from, it's not going to end. All that's going to happen is it's going to get transferred to your daughter and the people who love you. And they have to spend the rest of their life battling the same demons that you're not man enough to face up right now. And that's not fair. And that's when I hit my knees. I cried out to God. I'm listening. I called the one person who would even still answer my phone calls at the time, which is my dad. And he called the PTSD Foundation, which I didn't even know this, but my grandparents went to church with the man who started the foundation.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, they've been trying to get me help for a little over a year at that time. And I just wasn't listening. And so they sent a guy who does what I do, an outreach guy, came and picked me up from the dope house. I can't even tell you how they found me. To this day, I have no clue. They picked me up, took me to a detox center. The detox center wouldn't accept me because I didn't have health insurance. So I had to detox at my mom's house. And it was so bad that when I was sitting in the waiting room, the toxins that were oozing out of my body that I put in myself was so bad. The nurse walked over to me and just hosed me down with Febreze. No shame, no nothing. Just stood right in front of me and hosed me down because it was so bad. And so I detoxed at my mom's, and that the same guy who picked me up from the dope house actually took me to my first AA meeting. And then from there, he brought me to what we also have in the outreach sector. We have what's called a warrior group, which is a support group for combat vets. It's just like an AA or NA group, but it's for combat vets. We sit around a table and we just talk through our issues with people who are like-minded and have the same experience as us. And he took me to my first warrior group. And in this warrior group was when I act for the first time since I had been home from war, I actually felt at home. Because I was sitting around a table full of guys who most of them had worse deployments than me. I remember one, his name's Chris. He was a special forces Green Beret. Dude had like 10 deployments under his belt. And he's sitting there being open and vulnerable about his struggles and what he's dealing with. And in my head, I'm thinking, if this guy can do this, there's no excuse that I can't. And so I started to open up and I started to share. And after about a year of this, that's when the Camp Hope program started. And David came to me. He said, hey, we have this program that we're starting for combat vets. We think that you'd be a perfect fit for it. And at first I was like, hell no. But then I looked around at my situation and I mean, life hadn't gotten that much better. Yeah, I was sober, but I was surfing from couch to couch. The only money I was making came from a job I had bartending, which what a great environment to be for someone who's trying to stay sober is the bar scene. I had nothing going for me. I was like, you know what? Why not? I need to get my crap together anyways. And so I went to Camp Hope.
And when you started Camp Hope, what was that process like, the experience?
So I was still hard-headed and stubborn, man. So I bucked the system a lot. I got kicked out actually 3 different times for breaking zero tolerance rules. I snuck my pistol in because back then I was so out of my mind. You weren't going to catch me not strapped. I got kicked out for sneaking in drugs, and I got kicked out for sneaking in women. And what really got me to get it straight was my daughter, actually. I remember my ex-wife, somehow she found out that I was at this program. And I remember she called the front office and they told me, it called me in and they said, hey, Zach, you have a phone call. I remember this phone call to this day. I'll never forget it. I picked up the phone and she was like, hey, it's Alyssa. And I was like, oh, at this point, I hadn't seen or heard from her or my daughter in over probably about 2 years. And I was like, hey, and she's like, first and foremost, the one thing I want you to understand is me and you are done. There's nothing that will ever mend that. I hate you for what you did to us. I hate you for what you did to our family, and that's never going to change. However, I've heard that you've been going to this program for the issues that you have, and your daughter needs a father. So I will give you one chance to be in her life, and if you mess this up, you'll never hear from her again. And so it was for her 3rd birthday, actually. I went to her grandparents' house. I've been to her dad. It was actually my ex-wife's grandfather. I've been to their house numerous times, but I didn't see my daughter in about a little over 2 years. So I was scared to death. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just remember walking in the front door and I looked down the hallway to the living room and I see my daughter. She's playing with Lincoln Logs. which is great because I love Lincoln Logs. I grew up with Lincoln Logs. So I was like, okay. So I just sat down and started handing her Lincoln Logs. And after about 10 minutes, this little girl just looks up at me and she says, Daddy, where have you been? And it caught me off guard because I had nothing prepared for this little girl. I just said, baby, all I could say is what my mentor told me he told his daughter when she asked him the same question. That memory just popped. I was like, baby, daddy was sick, but I'm getting better, which is why I'm here now. And she looked at me, she said, so you're a new daddy now? I was like, yeah, baby, I'm really trying. And then she looked at me and she said, well, then can you come home with me and mommy because I've missed you? And as I'm looking at her, I'm seeing in these little 3-year-old eyes that I'm seeing a pain that I know all too well. It's the same pain that I was dealing with. It was a pain that I knew she didn't even understand. And I knew it was a pain that I put in her because I stole her father from her. And that was the first time I really understood what my actions were doing to other people. And it really sank in that I need to get my crap together because it's not just about me. I have a little girl who's looking up to me, who was counting on me to be her father. And I failed up until that point. So that's when I realized, and I hit my knees again. I cried out to God and I begged him. I said, if you give me my relationship with my daughter, I will serve you for the rest of my life. And that's been my plan ever since. So I got back to Camp Hope and I hit it hard. And I graduated in about 2014, is when I graduated from Camp Hope.
That is incredible. And family definitely has a big part of that. My kids are the reason why anytime that I even considered suicide, it was just my kids. I thought of them and my wife and what would they be like, their life be like afterwards. So I resonate with that greatly. What has your life been like since completing the program?
Well, so in 2014, me and the guy who created the foundation we bumped heads. He got mad at me for what I said in one of my testimonies. Told me I couldn't talk about Jesus unless I was talking about a church. And like I said, Camp Hope really reaffirmed my relationship with Christ. So I'm like, I'm not having that. Like, you're not going to tell me I can't talk about Jesus. Well, I ended up getting fired because of it. And so luckily for me, my mentor had been leaving to go to a different job, and he was going to the oil field. And I was having lunch with them and the oil field guys just because he invited me. And my mentor got the phone call. He said, hey, man, you're fired. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That sucks. He goes, don't even worry about it. Looks at the guys that we were having lunch with, and he was like, hey, if y'all want me, he comes with me. They were like, what? And I had never even stepped foot on an oil field, much less knew how to work in one. He just told me, I'll train him, but if y'all want me, he comes with me. And they wanted him bad, apparently, because they said okay and took me. So I worked in the oil field for about 2 years. And at that time, me and my ex-wife, she got remarried. So all the thought process and everything that we had been doing, she just canceled it, disappeared on me, took my daughter and bounced. So I got a bunch of advice, and all the advice, it was even judges would tell me, you got to get a lawyer. You have to take her to court. That's the only way you're going to enforce the court order. That's what I did. So for 2 years, I went and worked in the oil field. The oil field crashed. The oil field crashed real bad in around 2016. And my old fire chief, he had been trying to get me to come back to the fire department since I graduated Camp Hope, and I just wasn't ready. I couldn't. I was like, I'm fresh in my recovery. I'm new shape. I love you. I love the job, but I'm just not ready. And plus, I needed to make money. And what better place to make money than the oil field? I had to save up for a lawyer. I'm still fighting that battle. And so saved up, worked about 2 years. And when the oil field crashed, I'd gotten a good head on my shoulders. My fire chief called. He said, hey, I see the oil field just crashed. I was like, yeah. He's like, how long has it been since you were out on the rig? I was like, man, about like 6 weeks. He's like, you want to come back to the fire department? I got a spot for you. And I was just like, ain't no sense staying in the oil field. I ain't worked for 6 weeks. So I was like, you know what? I will go back to the fire department. So I went back to the fire department. And then that's when Camp Hope called and said, hey, we want you to come back and work for us. My old mentor had gone back and taken over the program. And I was just like, no, I'm not coming back there. You've lost your mind. Like, have fun with that. Hung up the phone. And about 2 days later, he calls me again. He goes, hey, man, I'm serious. These guys need you. And I was like, no, don't care. And that's when God had another conversation with me. And just like he did when I was at that dope house, he said, "You want to do your plan or do you want to do mine? Let me remind you what happens when you do yours."
Yeah,
And
God
I
has
was
a way
just
of doing
like,
that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was just like, man, because at that time I was working at the fire department. I had got a brand new side job doing roof inspections for insurance companies. So I was getting $100 a pop when my feet hit the roof. And that was during storm season. That was right during Harvey, after Harvey. Like I was making a lot of money. And I was fine. I was doing just fine. So I thought. But my spirit was never heavy. It was never, there was just something always missing there. And so I said, you know what, Lord, let's do your plan. So I went back to Camp Hope. It was hard. I took I want to say about a 2/3 pay cut. I was making a third of what I made doing the roof inspections and doing the fire department. Now I luckily my chief, he loved me. So what I would do is I would work on, and he didn't want to lose me. So I would work at Camp Hope during the week. And then on the weekends, I would just work the entire weekend at the firehouse. So that's how I made ends meet. That's how I, were able to, and I moved back on to Camp Hope. So I didn't have to pay rent. And I just started working on myself. I kept working on my recovery. I got my credit built back up. I really focused on Christ. And, at that time I got one of, a young lady who I was, having fun with, ended up getting pregnant. So I had another son too. And so I was realizing, I'm not living my life right. This isn't how God called me to live my life. So I got real heavy involved in living my life the way Christ called me to live it, so that I could teach both of my son and my daughter, what an authentic godly man looked like. And so, I really focused on just myself and Christ. And, next thing I knew, I was making my way through the ranks at Camp Hope. Went from a mentor to assistant program manager, and then they moved me to outreach because they wanted to go start building some chapters and spreading the word outside of Texas. And so I started building chapters, and then, I ended up getting married, and I now have technically he's my stepson, but his dad's not in the picture, so I adopted him. So that's my son. He's my son that I have full time. He's autistic, so he has taught me more about parenting than I ever learned from my father or my mother or anywhere else. That kid has taught me more than I think I've ever taught him, just about patience and understanding. And, my way is always not the right way. And God is he's just taken me places that I would have never even dreamed of for myself. But it took me having to surrender to him for me to get there, and not just halfway surrender. I had to surrender 100% to him and realize, my life does not belong to me. I wasn't put on this earth for myself. During that time that I was trying to kill myself, I could talk to you for hours about different events that I should have never walked away from. That the only reason I did was because God had a bigger plan for my life. And so really submitting to that, like I didn't want to go to school. I'm telling you right now, when I graduated with my bachelor's, I thought I was done. I threw my hands in there. I did it, used my GI Bill. Like I did it, Lord, let's move forward. And I'm sitting here listening to a podcast. I highly recommend it for those of you who like theology. And it's called the Hamilton Corner. And during one of the commercial breaks, a commercial for Liberty University came on. I thought nothing of it. I'm driving, listening to it. I'm like, yeah, right. Ain't no way I'm going back to school. And just like he was sitting there at the dope house with me, it was like he was sitting in the car. He said, apply, you're not done. And I dismissed it. I'm like, I didn't hear again, apply, you're not done. And I was just like, oh man, you're kidding me. But I did. And so I applied. I'm glad I did. I'm really enjoying seminary school. I have no clue what I'm going to do with this degree. I just know God told me to do it, so I'm doing it. And so far, I'm enjoying it. I'm still in a custody battle for both of my kids. That's hopefully going to come to a head finally. I have one court case in August to get my daughter back, and then I have a court case in October to get my biological son back. No one told me that turning my life over to Christ was going to be easy, or my life would turn into rainbows and lollipops. It's different because I now have a sense of peace, and I have a sense of serenity when I'm facing these storms, and the urge to go back to drugs and alcohol is just not there anymore. He blessed me and took that from me. That's not to say I don't walk into a gas station on a hot Houston, Texas day when it's 140 outside with the humidity of 140%. And I don't see those cold, sweating beers at the very front, that I don't think, man, that'd be nice. But that urge is not there. That there's a different urge in me. The different urge in me now is to support my fellow combat vets, and the urge to continue and to seek Christ, and to live my life the way He wants me to, and to like Paul says, I die daily. I die daily because I need others to see Christ through me, because I have the blessing of working in a demographic it's a very select demographic. They ran the numbers, and 7% of the U.S. population serves in the military, and less than 1% of the 7% sees combat. Right. So who better to serve and to reach the lost combat veteran than another combat veteran? Because if we're being honest, combat vets ain't gonna listen to a combat vet. I've tried it. I've sat in front of psychologists and therapists and all. If it's got an "is" at the end of it, I sat in front of them, and it was always the same. Have you seen war? Well, no. Then what could you possibly teach me about dealing with the struggles that come from war? No disrespect, Doc. You got all the schooling and all the books read and memorized, but what do you really know about the unseen wounds of war when you've never experienced it? Now I still see a therapist for sure. I see a licensed trauma therapist. I've been working through, my childhood trauma, working through the sexual abuse and tackling those struggles and those issues, which has been a huge help. But when it comes to reaching a combat vet about combat vet problems, it takes a combat vet. And so God has blessed me to work with what I call, my tribe, my people, the people that I feel comfortable with and fit in with. And, He's blessed me beyond anything I could ever imagine, especially coming from where I came from.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with PTSD, definitely that feeling of people not understanding. Like you hear me, but do you really
really hear me?
Yeah. That feeling is definitely, it doesn't really go away. I found
it doesn't.
No, it's there.
It
It's
hasn't
something
for
to
me
fight.
yet. Yeah, it hasn't for me yet, but
yeah, I know.
Luckily I'm in a place where I can, deal with it in a healthy way. And I have, thanks to Camp Hope, I have a lot of tools in my toolbox to help me cope with, the different struggles that come with, combat PTSD. Still learning this whole sexual trauma thing. That's a whole different ball game. I never addressed it at Camp Hope. I always thought, I tossed it to the side and didn't think it was that big of a deal until, I sifted through my combat PTSD, and next thing I know, I'm still having these, like my therapist says, she says 9 times out of 10, trauma doesn't emerge or show itself as memories. It shows itself as responses. And so I'm having these responses. Like, I thought I dealt with that. Why am I still having this response? And it went to my therapist. She's like, because you haven't dealt with your sexual trauma. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with my sexual trauma. And she's like, well, then you're going to keep having these responses. And I'm like, because now, now it's starting to, it's interfering with my marriage. It's interfering with how I parent, with my parenting style. And, it's interfering with my relationship with my kids. So that's the last thing I ever want. So I found myself at a point now where it's like going back to Camp Hope, but a different Camp Hope. Now I'm going to, childhood sexual trauma Hope, Camp Hope. But it's been good. I'm glad I'm doing it because it's helped me a lot. It's helped me understand myself more too.
Yeah.
Because everything go ahead.
I found for myself, they did eye movement therapy and integration therapy, both of them with me, and it helped piece memories together.
Yeah.
So that I could actually deal with it and be like, okay, this is what I all experienced, and stop the flashbacks. Because I would wake up with flashbacks, or during the day I would just stop and have a flashback, and it was really interfering with my life too. So dealing with that has been very, very helpful, and it was years of counseling. I'm still going through counseling for it.
Yeah, I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I am.
So tell us now what your role is with Camp Hope. What do you do for them?
So now I'm the general manager of our Houston chapter. So we're in this new stage of developing our outreach services. And so what I've brought in, just from working both the program side of our foundation and the the outreach side, I'm working to converge the two. So I'm working to build my chapter to be an IOP, like an intensive outpatient program, so that I can offer, because what I have found is not everybody can immerse themselves into a 6 to 8 month program, because at Camp Hope, it's minimum 6 months. Now, we don't force you to stay there. We'll never require anybody. There's no locked doors, none of that. But if you want what we have to offer, it's going to take at least 6 months to get through just the meat and potato of the portion. The last 2 months to 8 months is what we call transition. So that's for the guys who don't have a job, don't have a place to live, don't have a car, all of those things. We help transition them into finding those things so that they can live a successful life outside the program. So what I'm working to do is I want to bring everything that our intensive program offers, our inpatient program offers, to an outpatient, forum, right? So for the guy who has a job, he has a life, he's got a car, he has all these different things, but he could still benefit from all the different classes and the different programming that we have at Camp Hope. I want to be able to offer that. So that's what we're doing right now. I'm currently pushing our presence just from Houston proper and into the outer counties, the outskirt counties of Houston that aren't technically Houston, but we still service them. So I'm really striving to build a bigger presence, because everyone knows Camp Hope here in Houston. I'm working to build my chapter presence so people understand that we offer both inpatient and outpatient services. So we just brought on a clinical director I've been working hand in hand with him to develop it. So that's pretty much what I do now. I got a team underneath me, right? So now I find myself in the admin and political side of everything. Like, I'm no longer the field guy, which I love being in the field. But God's called me to do other things. So I have a whole team beneath me who do all the crisis calls. They do all of our intakes. We do a lot of events too. So, Camp Hope being so close, all these different fundraising events for the Camp Hope, my guys we'll work, different fundraising events, different awareness events, just really trying to get the word out that we do more than Camp Hope, because we got chapters in California, Arizona, Dallas, San Antonio, Georgia. We're about to build one. We're working to get one in Florida. I'm about to go out to Arizona next week to interview some of the candidates for the new GM position. So it's a lot. I'm enjoying this side of my job because it's challenging me, right? Being a field guy, that was easy. That was my wheelhouse. I was used to doing that. Having to step into a general manager position, I've had to, how can I say, polish myself, because I can be very blunt and, I'm very passionate.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes people can confuse passion for aggressive, but I'm learning, because now I'm in meetings with board members and directors, and I'm in the meetings with the president of our foundation. So I've really had to learn how to polish myself and how to I use this. My mentor does this. He'll do this to me if I'm getting out of. It's diplomacy. So if I see this, I know I have to, reel yourself back.
Yeah.
Diplomacy, like you're getting a little bit, right? So I'm having to polish myself, which I think is going to really help me if God ever decides to call me into the pulpit, once I get my, master's of divinity, I'm going to have to be able to, stay polished too. So it's challenging me. I'm having to learn a lot of admin stuff. I can use my computer for school stuff, but when it comes to like Excel, and I'm having to learn budgeting and all kinds of stuff that just outside of my wheelhouse. But I love a good challenge, so I'm really enjoying this position. Plus, I have a solid team underneath me who make my job easier. Sometimes I just sit around like I don't even know what I'm supposed to do today because they already took care of it. So I'm like, all right, I'll do some homework then. So I'm really enjoying the position.
Yeah, for myself, it's been a lot of adjustment too with this. Funding is something that we've been lacking with my podcast. So and I'm on disability right now. So it's been like, when that runs out in October, we need a solid income. So my wife's like, you gotta either think about going back to work or we gotta find a way to get funding. And so that's been like me learning a lot of that side of things too. And now we're talking about setting it up as a charity. Or a nonprofit, so we can help organizations like yourself get recognition and
Man, we could use
awareness.
all the help we can get. Begging for money sucks, but being
It
part of
does.
501c3, you have to. And so
Yeah,
I'm like, man, trying to figure out. I don't know how to do fundraisers. Like, I don't know what to do all that. I got to now because I got to be able to pay my team and bring money into my chapters. So it's a whole different world for me.
yeah.
But I enjoy the challenge.
Asking for money is hard.
It's hard.
I
It's
don't
really
know how to,
hard.
I even now don't know how to do that. And that's why it's like when if we can get
I'm
it set up as a
still trying to
nonprofit,
learn.
yeah, then I can get
Yeah,
like a board together where I can use their
yeah.
expertise because I'm the first to admit I don't know everything.
Me too. I've learned the hard way that I don't know everything at all.
Well, thank you for coming on. I've really appreciated it.
Absolutely, I really enjoyed it.
Could you just leave us with one piece of advice for someone who's struggling with PTSD and just is at that point where they don't know if they should get help or keep ignoring what's going on?
The first thing I want them to understand is, and I'm gonna talk to them as if I'm talking to you, like you don't have to do this alone. I promise you, you're not alone in these struggles. You're not alone in these thoughts. You're not alone in what you're dealing with. And you don't have to fight this battle alone. Asking for help is not weak. It is the exact opposite. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to reach out when you're struggling and ask for help. All it takes is a phone call. If you want to call me, our number is 877-717-PTSD. That's our 24-hour man by a combat vet for a combat vet that we will always answer, always talk to you. If you want to get to me, tell them to send you to Zack Alexander of the Houston chapter. They'll give you my information. I want you to understand you don't have to fight this battle alone. We have your back. We are here for you, and you are absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and that is so true. The weakness is when you ignore it. The strength is when you
Exactly.
face it.
Exactly. I was weak for a long time, and it wasn't until I gathered the courage and the strength to ask for help that my life got exponentially better.
So thank you for sharing with us today. It's been a real pleasure and a real eye-opener.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Cool Explorations podcast. You've just heard Zack Alexander speak about his journey with PTSD and his battle after he came home. So thank you for listening during what is PTSD Awareness Month. Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.